So something that I noticed from Gran Turismo 7's latest update was actually two of the game's worst cars got updated for no apparent reason whatsoever. Now one of them has been made even worse than it was prior to the update, and one even better. Of course, I'm talking about two different Toyotas, the Aqua S from 2011 and the Prius G from 2009, both notorious for being fairly terrible cars. So the first one I wanted to look at for its previous stats was the Toyota Prius G from 2009. Now in terms of the original stats that were on GT7 Wiki for this one, it had a power output of 120 brake horsepower. The car weighed 1350 kilograms and had a PP rating in GT7 of 378.87 pp. Which is absolutely nothing, and of course you will probably know I find the Toyota Prius to be the worst car in the entirety of Gran Turismo 7, but it's actually received a buff now. It is overall supposed to be, quotation marks, a better vehicle and a better package. The second car I want to look at is of course the Toyota Aqua S from 2011. Now this car had 120 brake horsepower. It had a weight which was quite a bit lower at 1080 kilograms, so really not too heavy. It had a PP rating in GT7 prior to the update of 359.97 pp. So definitely not a mind-blowing car, but credit where it's due, this is one of the starter cars to the game. So let's go ahead and actually check out the post-update 1.55 stats. We'll start with the Toyota Aqua S from 2011. This now has a PP rating of 354.12, and as you can see, the main alteration for this one is the max power, which has been reduced from 120 brake horsepower to 109 brake horsepower. It still weighs the same and nothing else has really changed here. However, it is worth noting that with update 1.55, Polyphony did naturally alter the PP ratings for almost every car in the game, so it would have changed regardless had the actual stats been changed. So of course the Aqua has seen a reduction in its PP rating, and it's the same story here with the Prius G from 2009. This now sits at a PP rating of 374.51. So it does seem that they've kind of been decreased across the board. However, it is worth noting that whilst the weight of the car is the same, this vehicle has had 26 extra brake horsepower added, now putting out 146 brake horsepower instead of 120. So it has received a buff overall, unlike the Aqua, which has received the nerf. So of course I wanted to go ahead and actually test both of these cars. The first thing I did was run them both at the same event in their absolute standard straight out of Brand Central form. And up first was the Toyota Prius, which has of course been made to be a much better overall vehicle, or at least much faster. Again, I still absolutely hate this thing. I am not saying it's good whatsoever, and it is still completely useless. However, when it came to the actual power output of 146 brake horsepower, and I did some research on the real world model, I couldn't see anything that remotely said this car was putting out anywhere near that. The most I actually saw was a combined power output for this model of 130 brake horsepower, which again is nowhere near 146. So yeah, I'm just not really sure where Polyphony pulled the 146 brake horsepower figure from. It does seem to be more than the actual real world car, and I'm not sure why they've all of a sudden just attached a fantasy power output to a real world car or model. It doesn't really make any sense. And honestly, it's a car that nobody uses unless they want to just go ahead and troll with it. The only time we actually saw this prior used in a, I guess, semi-serious fashion was last year during 2024's TGR Cup. The only thing I can think is that the lap times and car was just so slow during that event that if it makes a return this year, of course as another one make race, that it might just be a little bit quicker and more enjoyable to drive, but again, not by much. So in its standard form, did I notice any change to the overall performance? Yes, in a straight line. However, the car is still extremely clunky and just not that great to drive overall. So really, it's absolutely minuscule at best. So of course, next up we do have the Toyota Aqua S. Again, we're going to do the exact same as we did with the Prius. This car is completely standard, and of course, unlike the Prius, this one has had a nerf, so it should be overall much worse than it was prior. Now, when it actually comes to the car, I was trying to think why Polyphony would actually go ahead and alter this one. At least with the Prius, we have seen in some type of real-world racing format with that TGR Cup, but I don't believe the same is true for the Toyota Aqua. Now, when it comes to the car itself, it is one of the 3 beginner cars to Gran Turismo 7. I believe the 3 are the Toyota Aqua, Honda Fit, and I think the Mazda Demio, if I'm right there. And when it comes to those 3, the Toyota Aqua is absolutely the best bar none, or at least it was. The only reason I can think that Polyphony have altered this in the beginning of January is because of the new plays to the game, and of course when you load up the game for the first time, this is one of the first cars to pick. Maybe the fact is that everybody just went for the Aqua because in terms of its performance, it's easily the best of your 3 starter cars. So really, that's the only thing I can think as to why they'd actually alter the PP rating of this thing. So what about the actual performance of the standard car? Now, the Aqua was never a world beater when it came to the track, and it was actually really not that good whatsoever. But again, it was probably one of the better typical quotation marks Sunday Cup vehicles. And I would say it's exactly the same now as it was prior to the update. Although yes, it's had a nerf, it doesn't really change up the car whatsoever. It is still probably one of the better picks when it comes to your starter car or a Sunday Cup vehicle. So yeah, I would say altering the stats of this one was pretty pointless. The only reason I can think Polyphony did this was because of it being a starter car, and again in terms of the stats, this one always looked miles above the other 2, so maybe they just want new players to head over to the Honda or of course the Mazda instead of everyone just picking the Toyota, because stats wise it was the best. So as mentioned during that segment, I would actually go ahead and look at the overall times for both of these vehicles. Again, they were in the exact same event, which is the new Sunday Cup event with 1.55. As you can see with the Prius, it did it in a time of 3 minutes 29.152. It did a fastest lap on lap 3 of a 51.415. Overall though, the car does feel more powerful, but that's nothing to write home about. The Toyota Aqua, again, feels the exact same as it did prior to 1.55, did it in a time of 3:36.710 and a fastest lap of 52.747, once again on lap 3. Overall though, sitting around about 7 seconds back from the Toyota Prius. So when it comes to the standard cars, the Aqua didn't feel much different whatsoever, but the Prius kind of did. But I wasn't done there. I wanted to test out both of these cars when they are fully upgraded in, once again, both the same events, just so I can give them a fair comparison and test them out to see if anything feels much different. So here are the stats for both cars fully upgraded. Both of them are wide body variants and none of them will run a rear wing. Now when it comes to the PP ratings, 572.66 and 538.74. Brake horsepower on the Prius 186 and 139 for the Aqua. In terms of the weight though, the Prius was 1053 and the Aqua 885. So of course we have the fully upgraded runs here, and well, first is the Prius once again. Now when it comes to this car in terms of its fully upgraded performance, I used to absolutely rip this car a new one because it was notoriously bad. And whilst yes, overall it's nothing that exciting, I do find that overall it is just a much better car to, I guess, drive and race with this time around. It's still absolutely my least favourite car in Gran Turismo history, as well as perhaps my least favourite car in automotive history, but in terms of usability, it can actually perform reasonably well at a decent amount of events now. So it does seem that the buffing power this car has had has actually carried over to its fully upgraded counterpart. So yes, the car's more fun, yes, it's more powerful, and yes, it's more competitive. So yes, I kind of gave this car a bit of praise, and I feel like I'm going to have to go and quickly take a shower for saying that. But overall, if you're expecting this car to be completely changed and all of a sudden very usable and ultra competitive in some of the longer races in games so you can grind some credits in perhaps one of the weirdest ways possible, then that's not the case. It is still very much a useless car in that sense. However, if you want to go ahead and make a bit of a, mean build and just run it in some of the sprint races like I have done here, then yes, you can probably have some actual fun with this car now. Not by much, but it is still quite funny to see a Toyota Prius fully upgraded, launching away from the likes of an R34 GTR, for example. So what about the Toyota Aqua S then? Well, there's always been a plus point of this car, is that once you've got the weight off, it's incredibly lightweight. It almost feels like a bit of a go-kart. It's a much more nimble car than something like the Prius. Again, there's not much in it, but that huge weight reduction under 1,000 kilograms is incredibly useful through these shorter tracks in game. And I actually found myself having a lot of fun with this car prior to update 1.55. Now, unfortunately, maybe it's just a placebo effect from the update, but in a straight line, this car is even slower than it was prior to the update by a massive amount. Now it cannot keep up with anything whatsoever. Even the Fear Lady there completely disappeared into the distance, and there's not much in terms of upgrades on that thing. Whilst the power reduction was absolutely nothing major, it is really noticeable. Again, it could just possibly be a placebo, maybe the AI speeds change with the PP rating overhaul, but definitely in terms of that top speed, it is incredibly slow now, which is a real shame because it pretty much dooms this car to always be a bit of a Sunday Cup / starter car specialist. Anything outside of that, and really it's almost entirely useless. Yes, it could be maybe useful at some really short twisty track, because again, it feels fantastic through the corners, almost like a little nimble go-kart. Now of course, on the surface, the difference between 120 brake horsepower and 109 is really nothing major, but when we're talking about cars this slow, that aren't necessarily performance cars, it is a pretty big nerf. And again, this is one of the first ever cars you'll see in GT7 to actually pick from, meaning that a lot of newer players to the game might never even see this car and might pick maybe the Honda or the Mazda over it. And again, considering it doesn't really have a use at any of the higher PP events other than maybe a typical Sunday Cup race or a shorter, tighter track, maybe this car's almost pretty much doomed to be put away forever. So when it comes to GT7, it doesn't really shine as a starter car anymore. It's not as good as it once was as a bit of a Sunday Cup specialist, and of course fully upgraded, there's not really a massive use for this thing. So that really just leaves probably only 2% of the player base like me that likes to go ahead and just build absolutely ridiculous meme cars to just do something a little bit funny. Apart from that, the Toyota Aqua S might just become an incredibly obscure car to Gran Turismo 7 as a whole. However, I will say this now, I hold the Aqua in higher regard than the Prius. I just don't really like that thing. I've gave it enough compliments for one video and I never ever want to do that again. But when it comes to the Aqua, this car was the beginning of my Gran Turismo 7 journey. So for that, thank you, little Aqua, for kickstarting GT7 for me. So there we go, two of Gran Turismo 7's worst cars got an update with 1.55 for almost no reason whatsoever. Maybe the Prius is going to return in the TGR Cup, and maybe the Toyota Aqua just needed to be nerfed to make the other cars more enticing, considering that it was the best of the original 3 starter cars. But let me know what you think and why Polyphony went ahead to actually update vehicles that didn't really need it whatsoever. Also, if you guys went back to actually try these cars out for yourself, let me know what you think of them. Do you think they've improved? Do you think they've got worse? Just let me know down in the comments below. Anyway, a massive thank you for watching this video. It's great to be back making content full time once again. Take care guys. Peace.